Hello, good people of YouTube, and thank you for joining me today. Wanted to talk to you about something very different today. Normally, I'm always talking about books, or sometimes I talk about traveling or going to a punk rock festival or whatever it may be. But I wanted to talk a little bit about finances because I know a lot of people are struggling financially, a lot of people are in difficult situations, and a lot of people see no light for the future, especially younger people. And I just wanted to try to share something of my own personal story along those lines and see if it may help someone somewhere along the way. One of the first things that I thought is when I see Gen Z today saying there's no way we could afford a house. If it's any consolation at all, when I was of the age of Gen Z today, I also was upset saying there's no way I can afford a house. It's just impossible. It's not like it was when my parents were buying one. I think that could be something that, yes, things become more expensive, but I think that's something that's almost a standard thing as we go on in life. And, Today, I'm really grateful that I don't own a house. I'm absolutely delighted that I rent, and I truly think that, particularly for me as a single individual with no children, renting is the way to go. And I invest my money in other assets. And so let me tell you a little bit of a story about my history in terms of finances. Growing up in a very simple industrial family from the northwest of the UK, my family were never wealthy, never well off, always probably just above the poverty line, at best very working class. But my mum and dad were very responsible. They were always saving. They always did what they could to try to make sure that there was a financial security for the family. They didn't squander money, they didn't travel, they didn't drink, they didn't spend their money on anything other than just food, savings, the house, clothes, whatever it may be. Many years on from that, I found myself traveling around, and I ended up back in the UK 2001, and I started renting a bedroom in a 3-bedroom house, and I was paying about £300 a month. And I was living a great life. I was traveling. I was a short train ride outside of London, so I was in London every single weekend having fun, partying with my friends. I was in that situation up until 2004. In 2004, I had a long-term girlfriend who was in South Africa, and we decided to try and make something more of it. So we decided to bring her to the UK, and to do that we had to get engaged, and with that engagement came a fiancé visa, and with that fiancé visa came a stipulation that you had to get married within 6 months. And so, at the end of 2003, my fiancé arrived, and we lived for 4.5 months in the 1-bedroom together. And we realized that, of course, that situation was not suitable, so we decided that we had to move out and find our own place. And we found a 1-bedroom house that we rented, and our rent went from £300 a month to £750 a month. And of course, my fiance was not permitted to work in England at the time, so I was paying for that additional rent plus everything else that we needed. And I started my bachelor's degree in literature the same time, the beginning of 2004. That was in February 2004 when we moved into the house. And to meet the 6-month requirement of immigration, we got married in March 2004. And I started to feel bad because My wife had moved over to England with no friends, no family. Of course, she wanted to see them, and she kept requesting that we travel. Of course, we had the expense of the wedding. We didn't do anything expensive, to be honest, but we did have to. We did travel and have a little bit of an engagement party, and we had friends and family come and visit, and we took them out for meals and so on. And as the travel requirement started to come about, I would say, we don't have the money to do this, and my wife would say, well, just use your credit card. And so you do realize that even if you use your credit card, it's not free. You still have to pay that eventually. But in the end, guilt overwhelmed me, and I would pay for some trips for us to, or not for me, sometimes for myself, but for my wife to go and visit her family in South Africa, and then continued in this way for several years. And then in 2007, unfortunately, my wife's father was killed in a car crash, and she went back to South Africa. I recommended that she go back and spend some time with her family because she was feeling very depressed, and it was very difficult to care for her alone. She needed to have her family and her friends around her. And she went back and got involved with one of her ex-boyfriends. We decided to go our separate ways. And by 2008, we divorced. That was the final year of my bachelor's degree, which I couldn't afford, and I asked my company if they would be willing to pay for the final year, which they thankfully did. So I completed my bachelor's degree and got divorced at the same time. And in that time after the divorce, I was left struggling quite a lot because there was quite a heavy debt on the credit card, of which I was only paying interest every month. I was just accumulating more and more debt by just paying the interest. In my wife's absence, I discovered that there were store cards that she had that had debt on. We had adopted 2 cats that had very expensive insurance and very expensive dietary needs, so I was paying for those every month. And it got to the point where I was struggling to even to pay the rent, to feed myself. I was feeding the cats before I was feeding myself, and often eating stale bread, scraping mold off the bread so that I could put it in the toaster and toast it and have bread, and if I was lucky, with some butter on the toast. And I decided at the time to do something to try and get out of it, and I started to research loans to consolidate my debt. And I eventually found one that was a very low interest rate, and so I took out the loan and I consolidated my debt. I paid off my credit card, I paid off the store cards, I paid off everything else that had crept up out of the woodwork, and that was it. I just had one solitary payment to make every month, and yes, it was killing me, but I knew that it was a low interest one, and I had a definite target date for the completion of that. It was many years. It was about 5 years of suffering, paying off the loan, and going without many things, without much fun, without much travel, without any luxuries. And when I finally paid off the loan, I literally paid my final payment, and the very next month I used that same amount of money to begin my master's degree. And I started studying my master's degree, and of course I still didn't have much money, but it was something that I was determined to do and I really wanted to have. And then I was very fortunate. I was in trouble in my job. I was about to leave. I was about to give up and walk away and do something else and just try and live a more simple life. And I was offered a promotion and a relocation to Madrid, Spain. And so I gladly took this. In 2013, I moved to Madrid. My salary increased a little bit and my cost of living reduced dramatically, because in Madrid I was able to get rid of my car and of course the insurance around my car, the petrol, the maintenance and everything else. So my cost of living dropped dramatically and my salary went up a little bit. And I suddenly felt like I was a king. I suddenly felt like I owned the world. And of course, in Madrid, I didn't really do too much. I was not from a family that had really been taught to invest or anything else like that. So I started saving little bits of money. I completed my master's degree, and then all the money that I was spending every month to pay for my master's degree I was putting into savings. And in 2016, I got the opportunity to move to the US. I took it and I moved to the US. I got a little bit of extra money from the move and I put that into savings. And when I arrived in the US, my life was a lot more simple. I had no social life. I was sitting around at home, and all the money that I was saving, I was just putting into the bank and accumulating. And as proud as I was of all of the money that I was putting aside, I was now completely debt-free. I was a little bit frustrated because that money in turn was doing nothing. I was earning 0.0001% interest on that money. 2020, the COVID pandemic came along, and I decided to start playing around with investments. And I created an account on a little application or a tool called Robinhood, and I bought my first stock. I think I bought a little bit of, because you can buy $1 of a stock, you don't have to buy a full stock. I bought a couple of dollars of Microsoft and a couple of dollars of some pharmaceutical companies. You may have heard of some of them, like Pfizer. And just put a little few dollars here, a few dollars there, and every little bit I could save, I was putting into that, and I was just putting aside money instead of wasting it on useless things that I didn't need. I was just putting more and more into savings, buying more and more stock, but again, nothing too significant. Yeah, so in 2023, I walked into the bank and I said to them, I've accumulated a little bit of money. I want some interest on my money. I'm getting nothing. And the guy looked at me and said, if only you had come to me a year ago. And anyway, we walked into a little room. I had my computer with me that I'd purchased when I began my master's degree, because I wanted a reliable computer so that I could be writing my thesis and just close the lid and not lose it overnight. And I connected to the Wi-Fi in the bank, and I, under the consultation of this gentleman in the bank, I opened an account and I transferred all of my funds into it. And at the time, I suddenly was earning a very decent percentage of interest. I was delighted, and I was looking to buy a house at the time, and the mortgage rates were ridiculous. And in fact, twice I made offers that were accepted, and I was about to embark on this journey as a homeowner, and then discovered that the sellers tried to change the contract and they wanted me to pay for things that they'd said they would pay for, and I started to really get into the calculations of what I was going to owe. And I literally, on the second one, nearly died of a heart attack. I was so stressed and so upset that I'd gone ahead and actually made an offer, and I was even more devastated that it had been accepted. And when they started trying to change the contract, I just backed out. And it was quite funny because the real estate agent who I thought, hey, you're working for me essentially, was really upset with me, saying, you have a psychological problem, you won't commit. I said, yeah, you're absolutely right, you summed me up. I do have a fear of commitment. And I remember when I backed out of that second one, I was at home that evening, and it was during the middle of summer, and I got into the swimming pool. I had a beer, and I was looking up at my rented apartment, and I was so happy and so relieved. I just wanted to celebrate, and I thought, what a smart guy you are. You got yourself out of this real commitment to a house, which is just... People say that renting a house or an apartment is pouring money down the drain. In my opinion, buying a house is pouring money down the drain. I'm pouring all the money that I'm saving into investments, and let's see in 10 years' time what's worth more, the houses that you guys are buying or my investments. I'm not sure, but I know where I would rather be right now, that's for sure, and I feel much more comfortable. And so here we are, 2025. I was absolutely poor until 2014. I was 39 years old. I arrived in Madrid at 40 years old, and finally at 40 started to change this. I'm now 51 years old. I'm debt-free. I'm comfortable. I'm happy. I'm trying to avoid any kind of silly financial mistakes. And one thing that I would say is that it's absolutely true what they say. It's not about getting more money, how much you earn, winning the lottery. What's important is living below your means. And when you do earn more money, or when you do make more money, when you do win money, or whatever it may be, don't be tempted to upgrade your life to match that additional amount of money. And I will stop waffling on now, and if I release this without fear of being persecuted, I hope it helps you a little bit. Thank you. And there is one other very important thing that I forgot to say to you, and that is that an essential part of trying to rid yourself of debt or accumulate wealth or whatever it is that you're doing is keeping a budget. It doesn't have to be a complicated budget. Just take an Excel spreadsheet, put in how much you earn every month after taxes and so on, and then put everything that you spend that month and subtract the two and see how much you have left, and make sure that you put savings into that. And you'll be surprised how comfortable it makes you feel, because a lot of times you think, I don't have money, I don't have enough to save. But actually when you budget, you realize, oh look, I can spend this, pay this, save this amount, and still have 50 cents left over at the end of the month. And if you stick to that budget, you're going to be saving, and you'll have your 50 cents left over at the end of the month. But you've saved. Effectively, once you've accumulated wealth, you're no longer living paycheck to paycheck. Goodbye.